The opening sequence of Training Day is a masterclass in deceptive tranquility, a quiet prologue that establishes the final remnants of a moral world before it is systematically dismantled over the next 122 minutes. We begin in the cool, blue-hued half-light of dawn in a modest suburban home. Detective Jake Hoyt kisses his sleeping wife and infant daughter goodbye, his movements gentle, his expression one of determined optimism. This domestic scene, scored only by the ambient sound of a waking household, is the film's foundational investment in normalcy, a deposit of emotional capital that the narrative will violently spend. This moment is crucial because it defines what is at stake. Not just a career, but an entire conception of family, safety, and principled living. The cinematography here, by Mauro Fiore, is soft, stable, and composed, using traditional framing that suggests order and predictability. It is the last time the camera will feel this still, the last time the world will feel this safe. When Hoyt steps out the door, he is crossing a threshold from the private sphere of moral certainty into the public arena of corrosive ambiguity. The film, released by Warner Brothers in October 2001, exists at a precise and volatile cultural intersection, arriving mere weeks after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, an event that shattered American illusions of security and ignited complex, often troubling, debates about the limits of institutional power in the name of protection. Training Day, though conceived and shot before that tragedy, became an unwitting oracle, its exploration of a corrupt protector resonating with a national psyche newly anxious about the guardians at the gate. The film's production budget of $45 million was a significant but focused allocation of studio capital, a bet not on digital spectacle but on the raw, transformative power of performance and immersive realism. This capital was deployed with surgical intent to secure the services of Denzel Washington, who would undertake a radical departure from his heroic persona, and Ethan Hawke, the perfect vessel for audience identification, to finance extensive location shooting in the authentically gritty neighborhoods of Los Angeles, paying for the logistical complexity and community liaison work required to capture the city's nerve, and to support a technical approach that privileged documentary-like grit over Hollywood polish. The risk was substantial. This was a hard R-rated drama with an unlikable protagonist, a downbeat ending, and narrative that offered more psychological torture than plot-driven mystery. It asked audiences to marinate in discomfort, to empathize with a rookie's disintegration, and to be fascinated by a villain whose philosophy was seductively coherent in its corruption. The film's gamble was that in an era increasingly dominated by fantasy franchises, there remained a potent market for adult storytelling of uncompromising severity, for a cinematic experience that felt less like entertainment and more like a traumatic, necessary truth. We must frame Training Day not as a police procedural, but as a Socratic dialogue conducted at gunpoint in a moving vehicle, a day-long seminar in moral relativity taught by the most dangerous professor imaginable. The plot architecture is brilliantly simple, almost classical in its unity of time and action. One day, one rookie, one mentor. This simplicity is a container for immense complexity. Detective Alonzo Harris, a highly decorated undercover narcotics officer in the LAPD's Rampart Division, is evaluating rookie officer Jake Hoyt for a coveted spot on his elite squad. But this is no ordinary field test. Alonzo's evaluation is a gauntlet, a series of escalating ethical violations designed to either corrupt Hoyt into pliable complicity or destroy his will entirely. The day unfolds as a predatory economic journey. Alonzo does not enforce the law. He administers a personal sovereign territory. He levies taxes, stealing drug money, negotiates treaties with local gang lords, eliminates competitive threats through violence or legal frame-ups, and manages a portfolio of human assets fueled by fear and compromised loyalty. Jake Hoyt is a new potential equity in this dark enterprise. His value is his clean record, his physical ability, and most importantly, his malleable conscience. Alonzo's mission is to asset strip this conscience, to convert Hoyt's idealistic capital into functional, a moral currency usable within his kingdom. The film is therefore a real-time audit of a soul's valuation, a ledger where every principle sacrificed is logged against a potential reward of power, belonging, and a symbolic gold shield. This narrative operates on the level of myth and economics simultaneously. It is a hero's journey in reverse, a descent into an underworld where the guide is a devil, and the prize is not enlightenment but survival with a sliver of integrity intact. The Los Angeles cityscape is not merely a backdrop. It is the market floor for this dark economy. Its sun-baked streets and cramped interiors the transactional spaces where human dignity is bartered. The industry context of 2001 is essential to understand the film's boldness and its reception. Hollywood was in a transitional period. The independent film movement of the 1990s had begun to be absorbed by the studios, leading to a moment where director-driven, adult-oriented dramas could still command significant budgets and major stars, even as the tide was turning toward globalized franchise properties. Director Antoine Fuqua, a music video alumnus with one feature under his belt, was not an obvious choice for such a high-stakes project, but his visual style, grounded, kinetic, and attuned to urban textures, proved ideal. Screenwriter David Ayer, drawing on his own childhood in South Central Los Angeles and deep research into the LAPD, including the still-fresh Rampart scandal, provided a script of unparalleled authenticity in its dialogue and street-level psychology. Warner Brothers, the studio, demonstrated notable courage in greenlighting and supporting the film, trusting that the combination of Washington's star power and the material strength could find an audience. The film's technical philosophy was a conscious rejection of gloss. Cinematographer Mauro Fiore and Fuqua opted for a harsh, high-contrast visual style, often using natural light and handheld cameras to create a sense of immersive, unvarnished immediacy. The sound design, by a team led by Bruce Stambler, would be dense and specific, building the auditory world from the ground up with location recordings. Composer Mark Mancino would provide not a traditional score, but a landscape of ambient tension. This collective commitment to realism was a form of artistic risk. It denied the audience the comforting distance of cinematic artifice, forcing a confrontation with the material's unpleasant truths. The opening act of the film is a meticulously engineered process of induction and disorientation. Alonzo picks up Jake not in a standard police cruiser, but in a customized 1979 Chevrolet Monte Carlo, a vehicle that serves as a mobile throne room and a symbol of Alonzo's personalized extra-legal authority. Their initial conversation establishes the power dynamic through a disarming mix of casual intimidation, philosophical baiting, and performative camaraderie. Alonzo immediately lays out his worldview. To protect the sheep, you gotta catch the wolf, and it takes a wolf to catch a wolf. This statement is a thesis of his corrupted philosophy, a justification for moral compromise framed as tactical necessity. The first practical test is not observational. It is participatory and invasive. Alonzo forces Jake to smoke marijuana he claims is laced with PCP, a violation of bodily autonomy and departmental policy framed as a necessary step for street credibility. This act is the first direct debit from Jake's account of personal integrity, a calculated demonstration that in Alonzo's world, the rules are not just broken, they are irrelevant. The subsequent sequence, the brutal extrajudicial beating and robbery of two teenage gang members, is Alonzo's demonstration of his operational model. Justice is not a product of the courts. It is a commodity he manufactures and delivers personally, with a profit margin, the stolen cash, built into every transaction. Jake's horrified reaction is the audience's, but Alonzo's calm, pragmatic justification is perversely persuasive. He is not a raving madman. He is a CEO explaining a ruthless but effective business strategy. This efficient, shocking setup accomplishes in its first 30 minutes what lesser films spend an hour building. It establishes an irresistible and terrifying dramatic question. The suspense is not whodunit, But how far will he go? And how much of himself will Jake have to surrender to get out of this day alive? The stage is now set for a descent into a moral heart of darkness, with a guide who believes darkness is the only source of true power. As we embark on this comprehensive analysis, we are undertaking a forensic examination of a modern cinematic landmark. We will scrutinize how a $45 million budget was converted into an unparalleled atmosphere of dread and authenticity. We will deconstruct the alchemy of performance that made Denzel Washington's Alonzo Harris one of the most compelling villains in film history, and Ethan Hawke's Jake Hoyt the quintessential portrait of principled collapse. We will map the behavioral economics of the street, where every favor carries a compound interest of violence, and every moment of mercy is a strategic liability. We will analyze the production management that successfully navigated the volatile realities of shooting in Los Angeles' most challenging neighborhoods, capturing a volatile energy that cannot be faked. We will explore the marketing strategy that sold a bleak character study as a gripping must-see event, and the awards campaign that transformed a critical darling into an Oscar-winning institution. We will assess the film's lasting legacy, its influence on a generation of filmmakers, and its unsettling, growing relevance in ongoing cultural conversations about power, corruption, and justice. Training Day is a masterclass in sustained dramatic pressure, a vice that tightens incrementally around a protagonist and its audience for 2 relentless hours. It is a film that does not entertain so much as interrogates, that does not comfort but instead scars, leaving an imprint that time does not easily fade. Let us now step into Monte Carlo, accept the offered joint, and begin the long, bloody, and illuminating walk through Alonzo Harris's kingdom to understand not just how this film was made, but why it remains, decades later, a shocking and essential mirror held up to the face of. The first half of Training Day operates with a methodical, escalating precision of a master torturer. Each sequence a calibrated turn of the screw designed to dismantle Jake Hoyt's psychological defenses and assimilate him into Alonzo Harris's predatory ecosystem. This is not a random series of events. It is a curriculum, a dark pedagogy where the lessons are an applied moral compromise, and the final exam is a surrender of the soul. Following the shocking initiation of the robbery and beating, Alonzo shifts his instructional method from abstract philosophy to concrete, transactional corruption. He drives Jake to a dilapidated house in a forgotten corner of his district, the home of a man named Blue, a recovering addict. This scene is a critical masterclass in the behavioral economics of Alonzo's kingdom. On the surface, it appears to be a community outreach visit. Alonzo presents himself as a benevolent patriarch, checking on a struggling constituent, even offering him money. This performance of charity is a deliberate piece of theater for Jake's benefit, a demonstration of Alonzo's purported connection to and care for the community he polices. However, the transaction's true nature is violently revealed. The gift is not charity. It is a high-interest loan in the currency of fear. Alonzo casually, almost lovingly, details the horrific consequences Blue and his family will face if the debt is not repaid. The shift in tone is instantaneous and terrifying. The mask of compassion drops, revealing the grinning skull of pure extortion underneath. This moment is the first half's emotional and thematic fulcrum. It demonstrates that Alonzo's evil is systemic, not spasmodic. He has not merely infiltrated the community. He has woven himself into its very fabric of survival, not as a protector, but as the primary parasite. His power is not just in overt violence, but in the strategic creation of dependency and debt. For Jake, this is a watershed. The victims are no longer faceless gang members he can otherize. Blue is a broken, sympathetic man, a victim whose fear is palpable and whose exploitation is intimate. Jake's silent, wide-eyed horror in this scene is our own. He is no longer just an observer of corruption. He is now a witness to a specific crime with a human face, making his continued passive presence a form of active if unwilling, complicity. The line between bystander and accomplice begins to blur. Having established the parasitic nature of his power, Alonzo next tests Jake's capacity for allegiance under the guise of introducing him to tactical support. He takes Jake to meet his crew, Detectives Paul, Smiley, and Doug. This introduction is a pivotal exercise in psychological warfare and group dynamics. The crew are not just colleagues. They are shareholders in Alonzo's enterprise, veterans who have fully internalized its logic. Their loyalty is to Alonzo, not the LAPD. They view Jake with a mixture of cynical amusement and predatory assessment. Is he new capital or a liability to be written off? Their presence exponentially expands the scope of the corruption for Jake and the audience. This isn't one bad apple. It is a rotten, tightly knit orchard. The corruption is institutionalized within this micro-unit, complete with its own codes, rituals, and profit-sharing model. The subsequent scene at the home of Roger, a retired cop and Alonzo's purported mentor, is a masterstroke of perverted tradition and narrative manipulation. Set in a house that is a museum to a more honorable, bygone-era policing, filled with memorabilia, awards, and the ghosts of institutional pride, Alonzo spins a personal myth. He tells a story about his own father, a cop killed in the line of duty, suggesting his ruthless methods are a form of twisted filial piety, a warrior's legacy taken to its logical, brutal extreme. The story's truth is irrelevant. Its function is myth-making. It provides a tragic, heroic backstory to justify monstrous present actions. It is a performance for Jake, designed to elicit sympathy, foster a sense of shared legacy, and frame Alonzo's corruption as the evolution of a noble tradition, not his betrayal. Jake is being invited not just to join the crew, but to buy into a story, to become a character in Alonzo's self-authored epic of necessary evil. This appeal to narrative is a far more sophisticated and dangerous form of coercion than simple threat. The core of the first half's dramatic engineering, and its most devastating psychological trap, is the orchestrated setup at the home of the drug dealer known as the Sandman. This sequence is Alonzo's masterpiece of applied corruption, a multi-layered test that blends temptation, survival instinct, and moral entrapment. Alonzo orchestrated a scenario where Jake, left alone to search the house, would discover a massive, seemingly abandoned stash of money and drugs. The unspoken implication is that Jake should seize it, crossing the ultimate line from observer to thief, from compromised cop to full partner in crime. The scene is a nightmare of subjective tension. The audience, locked to Jake's point of view, navigates claustrophobic, hostile space. Every creak of the floorboard, every shadow, feels threatening. The cinematography shifts to a more frenetic, uneasy handheld style, mirroring Jake's escalating panic. This is not a scene about action, but about the unbearable weight of decision under duress. The trap is sprung when the home's occupants return. A chaotic, brutal firefight erupts. Jake, acting purely on survival instinct, is forced to shoot and kill an attacker. This act is the point of no return Alonzo has been engineering. The killing is legally justifiable, self-defense, but its context is morally grotesque. Alonzo has manipulated Jake into a situation where violence is the only exit, making him a killer and binding him to Alonzo through a shared, bloody secret. The aftermath is where Alonzo's true purpose is revealed. He and the crew arrive not as backup, but as a cleanup and asset recovery team. They calmly execute a wounded survivor and loot the place of money and drugs. For them, it's a successful, profitable operation. For Jake, standing covered in blood and sweat, it's a traumatic, soul-scarring event that Alonzo reframes as a rite of passage. "That's your first kill, isn't it?" he says, not as a question but as a statement of ownership. The moral ledger is now catastrophically unbalanced. Jake's hands are no longer clean. They are stained, and Alonzo holds a receipt. The rookie is now an asset with blood equity, his idealistic capital fully liquidated and converted into a debt of shared guilt. As the first half concludes, the stakes violently pivot from the philosophical to the desperately personal, driving away from the carnage of the Sandmans. With Jake shell-shocked in the passenger seat, Alonzo finally reveals the terrifying engine driving the day's chaotic, cruel curriculum. A debt. He owes $1 million to the Russian mafia for having murdered one of their drug dealers without authorization, and he has until midnight to pay or be executed. This revelation is a narrative earthquake. It recontextualizes every previous event. The day has not been a general exercise in corruption or perverse evaluation. It has been a frantic, high-stakes capital raise. The robberies, the shakedowns, the setup of the Sandmans, all were moves to accumulate the cash needed to save Alonzo's life. Jake is not a trainee. He is an unwitting resource, a pawn to be used and potentially sacrificed in Alonzo's survival strategy. This transformation of Alonzo from a figure of arrogant, philosophical power to a desperate, cornered animal raises the dramatic tension exponentially. His kingdom is revealed to be a house of cards, his invincibility a carefully maintained facade. The second half is no longer a question of whether Jake will be corrupted, but whether he can avoid being liquidated as a disposable asset in Alonzo's failing enterprise. The first half ends with this horrific clarity. Jake is trapped in a car with a wounded wolf who is himself being hunted by bigger predators. The sun begins its descent, casting long, ominous shadows. The emotional and narrative capital so carefully built in the opening. Jake's loving family, his hopeful ambition, his black and white moral code, has been fully spent. What remains in the account is the raw, primal calculus of survival. The stage is set for a night where the teacher becomes increasingly reckless. The lesson plan dissolves into a scramble for survival, and the student must learn his final, most brutal lesson: how to outthink and outmaneuver the master in the very jungle the master claimed to own. The second half of Training Day abandons all pretense of pedagogy and descends into a pure, ruthless battle for survival, a nightmarish inversion where the hunter becomes a prey and the student must outmaneuver his master in the very jungle he was meant to conquer. With the revelation of Alonzo's $1 million debt, the film's economy shifts from corrupt enterprise to outright predation. Alonzo is no longer a CEO managing his territory. He is a cornered asset manager liquidating everything to cover a catastrophic liability. Jake Hoyt transforms from a potential investment to a disposable piece of collateral. The drive to Alonzo's girlfriend's house is thick with this new, deadly tension. Alonzo's attempt to maintain his facade of control, boasting about his women, his cars, his lifestyle, now ring hollow, the desperate boasts of a bankrupt man. The visit to Sarah's house serves two functions. It shows the gilded cage Alonzo has built with his illicit gains, the sleek modern home, the beautiful family he visits like a tourist, and provides a setting for the film's most chillingly intimate confrontation. Alone with Sarah for a moment, Jake tries to warn her to reach for any lifeline of decency. Her response, "You're a good man, I hope you live," is a death sentence in a blessing's clothing. It confirms the absolute, isolating lethality of Alonzo's world. Even those who love him understand the rules. There are no allies, only survivors and casualties. The narrative then accelerates into its final brutal act, the planned robbery of the drug lord, the Big Al. This is Alonzo's Hail Mary, a high-risk, high-reward venture to secure the final capital he needs. He reveals the plan to Jake and the crew at a diner, laying out the tactical assault on a fortress-like house. Here, Alonzo's leadership is at its most militaristic and manipulative. He frames the robbery as a righteous strike against the kingpin, tapping into the crew's worn-down sense of crusading justice. For Jake, it's a transparent setup. He is to be the rabbit, the expendable point man who draws fire. Alonzo's earlier question, "You got a little rabbit in you?" finds its horrifying, literal answer. This sequence is the culmination of the film's psychological engineering. Jake is faced with a choice that is no choice. Die as a rebellious rookie or die as a pawn in Alonzo's game. His decision to go along, to feign compliance, marks his final transformation. He is no longer the idealist reacting in horror. He is a strategist fighting for his life, using the street-smart observation skills Alonzo himself has unwittingly sharpened. The assault on the Big AL's compound is the film's kinetic and moral explosion. It is chaos rendered with terrifying clarity. The crew's military precision quickly shatters under the defensive fury of the gang. Jake, playing his part, enters a house and immediately becomes a target. In the maelstrom, he makes his move for survival and sabotage. He doesn't try to be a hero. He tries to be a ghost. He disarms a crew member, avoids a crossfire, and watches as Alonzo's empire of fear crumbles in real time. The crew is wiped out. Smiley, Doug, and Paul are killed, their loyalty yielding a zero return on investment. Alonzo, grabbing the money, becomes a rat fleeing a sinking ship, abandoning his men. This is a final, devastating lesson for Jake. Alonzo's philosophy to protect the sheep, you gotta be a wolf, end with the wolf eating its own. The crew were not partners. They were expendable assets, and their value was liquidated in a hail of gunfire. Jake's escape, bloody and desperate, is a rebirth through fire. He emerges not as a triumphant hero, but as a sole survivor, the only one who understood the true cost of the ledger. The film's climax is a masterclass in poetic, street-level justice. Jake, having escaped, doesn't go to internal affairs or a pristine courtroom. He goes to the very neighborhood Alonzo claimed to own, to the gang members Alonzo robbed and brutalized in the morning. This is the ultimate subversion of power. Jake uses the neighborhood's own codes, respect and retribution, to turn the tables. He returns the stolen money to Blue's cousin, a small act of restorative justice that buys him credibility. He then delivers Alonzo, wounded and desperate, to the vengeful gang. The final confrontation in the street is stark and brutal. Alonzo, bleeding out on the pavement, delivers his last grandiose soliloquy. King Kong ain't got shit on me. It's a final, futile attempt to assert a mythical status that the street has already nullified. His death is not a dramatic shootout with Jake, but an execution by the community he terrorized and exploited. The system he corrupted and the streets he ruled both reject him simultaneously. Jake walks away, not with badge of honor, but with the hollow, traumatic knowledge of survival. He has saved his life and his soul, but they are both permanently scarred. The denouement is haunting in its ambiguity. Jake returns home in the early morning light, a mirror of the film's opening, but now a changed man. He hugs his wife, but the look in his eyes is distant, shell-shocked. The final shot is of the gold detective shield, Alonzo's symbol of corrupt power, lying on Jake's kitchen table. It is a trophy, a warning, and a question. Has he earned it? Does he even want it? The film offers no easy answer. The second half successfully converts the intense psychological pressure of the first into a relentless survival thriller, then concludes not with cathartic victory, but with a deeply unsettling and earned ambiguity. Jake is free from Alonzo, but he is now a prisoner of the knowledge Alonzo imparted, that the line between wolf and sheep is not just a line in the sand, but a battlefield where his own humanity was nearly the final casualty. The return on his harrowing investment is not a promotion, but the bare, precious fact of his own remaining integrity, purchased at a price few could ever comprehend. The Psychology of Training Day is a brutal, real-time dissection of two competing moral operating systems under extreme duress, a clash not just of personalities, but of fundamental worldviews about power, survival, and the nature of justice itself. At the film's core is the devastatingly charismatic pathology of Detective Alonzo Harris. His psychology is a complex, toxic alloy of narcissism, pragmatism, and profound trauma. He is not a simple psychopath. He is a systems thinker who has rationalized his own corruption into a coherent, self-justifying philosophy. His famous monologues, "It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. To protect the sheep, you got to catch the wolf, and it takes a wolf to catch a wolf," are not just boasts, they're the tenets of his personal religion. His worldview is a form of social Darwinism applied to urban policing. He sees the street as a jungle ecosystem where traditional law is a useless abstraction, and only power, cunning, and the willingness to be more brutal than your adversary can create order. His charisma is a deliberate tool, a way to captivate, intimidate, and recruit. His manipulation of Jake is a masterclass in applied behavioral psychology. He uses shame, temptation, fear, and even paternal approval to systematically dismantle Jake's identity. However, his psychology cracks under the pressure of his own debt. The revelation exposes his grand empire as a fragile facade. His desperation reveals a core, sheer, animalistic survival instinct, proving that beneath the philosophical wolf is a scavenger fighting not to be eaten. Jake Hoyt's psychology is the audience's conduit, a study in the gradual, forced erosion of naive idealism. He begins the day with a clear, linear model of justice. Follow the rules, work hard, protect the innocent. Alonzo's world presents a nonlinear, chaotic system where those very concepts are liabilities. Jake's initial psychological response is cognitive dissonance, a struggle to reconcile what he's seeing with his ingrained beliefs. His horror at the early crimes is genuine, but so is his ambition. He wants the gold shield. This desire creates a vulnerability Alonzo exploits with surgical precision. Throughout the day, Jake's psychology is pressured through a series of escalating moral violations. The PCP-laced joint is a violation of bodily autonomy. Witnessing the robbery is a violation of his oath. The setup at the Sandman's forces him into a violent act of self-preservation that morally implicates him. Each event is a psychological tax, withdrawing from his account of certainty. His transformation is not into a copy of Alonzo, but into a pragmatist fighting for his soul. By the second half, his psychology shifts from passive horror to active, desperate calculation. He learns to use Alonzo's own lessons, observation, manipulation, understanding the street's economy of favors and fear, to turn the tables. His final victory is not a triumph of his initial idealism, but a grim application of the ruthless street logic he was forced to learn, used for a morally defensible end, his own survival and Alonzo's downfall. The supporting characters function as psychological mirrors and pressure valves. The crew, Paul, Smiley, Doug, represent the end-state psychology of buying into Alonzo's system completely. Their loyalty is not to the law, but to the alpha who provides profit and a twisted sense of purpose. They have fully rationalized their corruption, seeing themselves as soldiers in a war rather than criminals. Their deaths are the logical conclusion of that psychology, assets expended in a failed venture. Roger, the retired cop, represents a different, more tragic psychology. He embodies a generational handoff of corruption, a man who may have started with principles but now lives in a comfortable retirement funded by Alonzo's tribute, willfully blind to its source. His home is a museum to a noble past he has betrayed. Sarah represents a psychology of willful compartmentalization. She knows what Alonzo is, but she has chosen the safety and luxury he provides, insulating herself from the blood that pays for it. Her warning to Jake is an admission of her own trapped state. The community members, Blue, the gang members, represent the psychology of the oppressed market. They live under Alonzo's predatory economy, their behavior shaped by fear, survival, and a deep, simmering desire for retribution that Jake ultimately catalyzes. The psychological landscape of the film is also a geography of Los Angeles itself. The sun-baked, claustrophobic streets of the Rampart District are not just a setting. They are a character that exerts constant psychological pressure. The heat, the confined spaces of cars and cramped houses, the ever-present sense of being watched, all contribute to a feeling of inescapability that mirrors Jake's moral trap. The journey from the relative order of Jake's suburban home in the morning to the anarchic, neon-lit gang territory at night charts his psychological journey from innocence to a hardened, traumatic awareness. The film's visual language, with its extreme close-ups and subjective camera work, puts the audience directly inside Jake's escalating panic and Alonzo's intimidating aura, making the psychological warfare visceral. Ultimately, the film's most profound psychological insight is about the cost of knowledge. Alonzo's training is an education in the true, hideous mechanics of power. By the end, Jake possesses this forbidden knowledge. He understands how the system can be perverted, how fear can be monetized, how a badge can be a license for tyranny. This knowledge is a burden that isolates him. He cannot return to his simple worldview, nor can he embrace Alonzo's. He is stranded in a moral no-man's land. The final shot of the shield on his table is a perfect psychological symbol. It represents the goal he sought, now rendered meaningless and sinister by the cost of obtaining it. It represents the power he now understands how to wield and the terrible temptation it embodies. Jake's psychology at the end is one of traumatic stress and ambiguous victory. He has survived with his core decency intact, but his mind is now a permanent battlefield where the ghost of Alonzo Harris will forever argue the case for becoming the wolf. The film posits that in certain environments, the greatest psychological triumph is not emerging unscathed, but emerging at all, with just enough of your soul left to mourn what was lost in the fight. The financial architecture of Training Day is a fascinating study in mid-range budget efficiency, where strategic capital allocation towards powerhouse performances and authentic location immersion yielded an extraordinary return in critical acclaim, cultural impact, and ultimately profitability. The production budget was set at a lean $45 million, a figure that reflects its status as a serious, adult-oriented drama rather than a VFX-driven blockbuster. This budget was allocated with precision. A significant portion was dedicated to securing Denzel Washington, whose star power and transformative performance were the project's cornerstone, and Ethan Hawke as a perfect foil. The remainder funded the film's gritty, verite-style production. Unlike films that build expensive sets, Training Day invested in location authenticity. The production secured extensive access to shoot in the actual neighborhoods of South Central and Westlake Los Angeles, paying for permits, community liaisons, and the logistical complexity of filming in volatile, real-world environments. Money was spent on the tangible texture of the film, the iconic, customized 1979 Monte Carlo, the wardrobe that defined character, and the meticulous sound design that built the oppressive auditory landscape of the streets. This was an investment in immersive realism, a gamble that the audience's belief in this world will be the film's greatest special effect. The marketing and distribution spend for the film, likely in the range of $20 to $30 million, was strategically targeted. Warner Brothers faced the challenge of selling a dark, morally ambiguous, R-rated drama with a downbeat ending. The campaign wisely focused on the electric, career-redefining performance of Denzel Washington. Trailers and posters emphasized his chilling charisma and the film's high-stakes, day-long narrative, positioning it as a gripping thriller rather than a bleak treatise on police corruption. The tagline, "The only thing more dangerous than the line being crossed is the cop who will cross it," perfectly framed the central conflict. The film was released on October 5, 2001, a date just weeks after September 11th. This timing was coincidental but impactful. In a climate of national fear and heightened focus on protective institutions, the film's exploration of a corrupt protector added a layer of unwitting, profound relevance. The distribution strategy was a platform release, opening in 1,773 theaters, a solid count for a drama, and then expanding as word of mouth, particularly about Washington's performance, grew. The break-even logic for Training Day was favorable given its controlled costs. With an estimated total cost, production plus marketing, of $65 to $75 million. The film needed to gross roughly $150 to $180 million worldwide to become profitable under standard industry multipliers. This was an ambitious but achievable target for a film with its level of star power and critical buzz. The film's performance, however, would be heavily reliant on domestic box office, as its specific American urban context was less of a guaranteed draw internationally than a globe-trotting action film. The financial risk was moderate. The budget was not exorbitant, but the subject matter was challenging. The potential reward, however, was high, not just in box office, but in awards prestige which would drive further revenue in ancillary markets and burnish the studio's reputation for quality filmmaking. The box office performance of Training Day was a strong validation of its quality and marketing. It opened to a solid $22.6 million, finishing first at the domestic box office. It demonstrated impressive staying power, a testament to strong word of mouth, declining only 36% in its second weekend. Domestically, it legged out to a total of $76.6 million. Internationally, it added another $17.8 million, for a worldwide total of $104 million. While this gross did not reach the blockbuster stratosphere, it was a clear financial success against its $45 million production cost. More importantly, the film's cultural and award season impact would dramatically increase its long-term value. The theatrical run proved that a hard-hitting, star-driven drama with uncompromising content could connect powerfully with audiences and turn a very healthy profit. The ancillary revenue streams and long-term valuation of Training Day are where its true financial legacy was cemented. Its home video performance was stellar. As a film driven by dialogue, performance, and rewatchable intensity, it became a staple of the DVD market, generating tens of millions in high-margin revenue. Its television licensing value soared, especially after Denzel Washington won the Academy Award for Best Actor. The film became a permanent fixture on cable television, its gripping, episodic day-long structure making it perfectly suited for commercial breaks. The award win transformed the film from a successful drama into a prestige title, ensuring its inclusion in collections and retrospectives. The lifetime revenue from all windows, theatrical, home video, TV streaming, is estimated to be well over $250 million, representing a spectacular return on the initial $45 million investment. Furthermore, the film's cultural capital is immense. It redefined the police drama genre, influenced a decade of gritty television and film, and provided two of the most iconic performances in modern cinema. For Warner Brothers, it is a perennial asset that continues to generate revenue and prestige. Financially, Training Day stands as a masterclass in leveraging moderate capital to achieve maximum artistic and commercial impact, proving that a film's true profitability is measured not just in opening weekend dollars, but in its enduring power to captivate audiences across decades. The filmmaking technology of Training Day is a deliberate and masterful exercise in controlled grit, a rejection of Hollywood gloss in favor of a raw, immersive, and psychologically pressing visual and oral language. This is not a film built on CGI or complex mechanical effects. Its technology is one of authenticity and emotional engineering, using camera, sound, and location as tools to induce a state of relentless, sweaty anxiety. Cinematographer Mauro Fiore, who would later win an Oscar for Avatar, made a series of pivotal choices that defined the film's oppressive atmosphere. He shot primarily on film stock, utilizing natural light whenever possible. The infamous Los Angeles sun becomes a character, a blinding, inescapable force that bakes the streets, amplifies the tension, and leaves no shadow for characters or the audience to hide in. Fiore used handheld cameras not to create chaotic, indecipherable action, the style that would later be known as shaky cam, but to create a subjective, intimate proximity. The camera sits in the back seat of the Monte Carlo, pushes in on Washington's face during a monologue, or nervously follows Hawk through a hostile house. This technique generates a documentary-like sense of being there, making the viewer a trapped passenger in Alonzo's car and a witness to Jake's unraveling. The film's color palette and production design are technologies of psychological coding. The world is drained of comforting or heroic colors. The palette is dominated by the harsh, bleached yellows and browns of sun-baked stucco, the sickly greens of old lawns, and the gritty grays of concrete and asphalt. Interiors are cramped, cluttered, and feel lived in with a sense of desperation, from Blue's decrepit house to the Sandman's hostile den. This visual starkness refuses the audience any aesthetic respite, mirroring Jake's own inability to find a safe harbor. In stark contrast are the brief glimpses of Alonzo's ill-gotten rewards. The sleek, cold modernity of Sarah's house with its clean whites and blues, and the rich, dark wood of Roger's home. These spaces feel artificial and disconnected from the street, visual representations of the gilded cages built on corruption. The Monte Carlo itself is a perfect piece of technological character design, a classic American muscle car customized with ostentatious rims and a booming stereo. It is Alonzo's mobile throne in prison, a symbol of his power and his trapped, looping path through his kingdom. The sound design and mixing, overseen by a team including rear-recording mixer Michael Minkler, is a critical and often overlooked layer of the film's technological assault. The mix is dense, specific, and relentlessly foregrounds diegetic sound. The low rumble of the Monte Carlo's engine is a constant drone of menace. Street sounds, distant sirens, barking dogs, arguing neighbors, blaring radios, are layered to create a palpable sense of a neighborhood that is alive, watchful, and dangerous. This ambient soundscape never lets up, creating a subliminal tension. In moments of violence, the sound is brutally crisp and impactful. The wet thud of a beating, the specific rack of a shotgun, the deafening blast and confined space of the Sandman's house. These sounds are engineered for visceral impact, not cinematic glamour. Most importantly, the technology of the dialogue mix is pristine. Every word of David Ayer's street-savvy, philosophical, and threatening script is crystal clear. This is essential, as the film's power is built on verbal manipulation. We must hear every nuanced shift in Alonzo's tone, from paternal warmth to icy threat, and every tremor in Jake's responses. The score by the legendary composer Mark Mancina is used sparingly and strategically. It employs droning, ambient electronic textures and occasional mournful brass, less to tell the audience how to feel and more to amplify the existing unease, often acting as a psychological heartbeat for Jake's escalating panic. The editing by Conrad Buffour is a technology of relentless momentum and revealing juxtaposition. The film's real-time structure is maintained through a pace that feels both deliberate and breathless. Scenes are not lingered upon. They accumulate like body blows. Buff uses match cuts and graphic matches to create a sense of inescapable continuity. A shot of the sun glaring through the windshield cutting to a similarly composed shot hours later. The light changed, but the trap unchanged. The cutting in the action sequences, particularly the raid on the Big Al's house, is chaotic yet geographically coherent. We understand the layout, the crossfire, and Jake's perilous position because the editing prioritizes spatial awareness over frenetic confusion. This technical discipline ensures the violence is terrifying and meaningful, not merely sensory overload. Perhaps the most crucial and least tangible technology was the production's commitment to location as a form of method filmmaking. By embedding the cast and crew in the actual environments of South Central LA, they harness the intangible energy, history, and tension of those streets. This isn't a technology of construction, but of capture. It allowed for improvisation, for real interactions with community members, many of whom appear as extras, and for performances to be rooted in a tangible, volatile reality. The film's technological triumph is its synthesis of these elements. The verite camera work, the oppressive sound design, the stark production, and the authentic locations all fused to create an immersive simulation of a day in hell. The technology serves to erase itself, leaving the audience feeling not that they have watched a film, but that they have survived an experience. This is the highest achievement of cinematic craft. Using all tools available not to dazzle, but to make the artifice disappear, leaving only the terrifying, unforgettable truth of the story. The production management of Training Day was a high-wire act of logistical precision and community diplomacy, a venture that required navigating the volatile realities of early 2000s Los Angeles neighborhoods while harnessing the intense, method-driven energies of its lead actors. This was not a soundstage production. It was an urban immersion, and the management challenge was to maintain absolute creative and physical control over an environment inherently resistant to it. Producer Jeffrey Silver and director Antoine Fuqua's primary task was to establish a production infrastructure within the communities of Westlake and South Central LA that was both respectful and authoritative. This began with a significant allocation of the film's $45 million budget towards community relations. Liaisons were hired to negotiate with neighborhood councils, business owners, and street organizations. Permits were secured not just from the city, but from the informal power structures of the streets. This was an investment in access and safety, a non-negotiable cost for achieving the film's documentary-level authenticity. The production had to function as a temporary, benign yet firm occupying force, providing jobs for local extras and crew, stimulating local businesses, but also maintaining strict boundaries to prevent the very criminal elements the film depicted from interfering with the work. This delicate balance required 24/7 managerial attention, as a single misstep could shut down filming or incite real violence. The management of the film schedule, a tight 45-day shoot, was dictated by the punishing requirement of capturing a full narrative day, from dawn to deep night, in Los Angeles' natural light. This imposed a brutal, non-linear shooting logic. Scenes set in the late afternoon golden hour might be shot back-to-back with scenes set in pitch black, requiring meticulous planning for continuity of performance, costume. The accumulating sweat and blood on Jake's shirt is a story in itself, and light. The production managers had to create a daily roll call that accounted for the sun's arc, weather contingencies, and the availability of key locations that could only be secured for limited windows. Furthermore, the film's intense dialogue-heavy scenes, particularly the duels inside the Monte Carlo, required a protected bubble of focus. Managing the perimeter shot on an active city street, holding back traffic, curious onlookers, and ambient noise was a constant, resource-draining effort. Each minute of captured silence for Washington and Hawk to perform represented hours of coordinated logistical labor by a small army of assistant directors, location managers, and security personnel. Central to the production's operational risk was the management of its two stars, both operating at a peak of immersive, method-adjacent preparation. Denzel Washington's transformation into Alonzo Harris was a round-the-clock commitment. He remained in character, in accent, and in attitude for the duration of the shoot, a choice that electrified the set but also required careful handling. The production management had to ensure his energy was channeled into the scenes without creating an untenable atmosphere for crew. His iconic improvisational moments, like the King Kong speech, were eruptions that had to be captured technically, with cameras rolling, sound ready, while maintaining the safety of the real neighborhood residents watching just beyond the camera line. Ethan Hawke's management was of a different kind. His role required a physical and emotional deterioration in real time. The production had to support his process, which involved submitting to genuine stress and exhaustion, while ensuring his well-being. The management of the scene where Jake is forced to smoke PCP-laced marijuana, for instance, involved careful oversight to simulate the effect without actual endangerment, a negotiation between performance authenticity and actor safety that falls squarely on production management. The staging and execution of the film's violent set pieces presented a cascade of managerial hurdles. The brutal beating and robbery of the two teenagers early in the film, shot in a public park, required choreography with stunt performers, coordination with the LAPD, who had to be assured the scene was not real violence, and crowd control. The climactic raid on the Big AL's house was a small-scale military operation. It involved pyrotechnics, blank-firing weapons, multiple stunt performers, and complex camera moves, all within a residential neighborhood at night. The management task here was one of military-grade precision, ensuring every blank round was accounted for, every explosion was safely contained, every stunt fall was properly padded, and every resident in nearby homes was informed and, in some cases, temporarily relocated. The cost of a single accident, physical, legal, or public relations, could have dwarfed the film's budget. The production safety record was therefore its most critical financial asset. Finally, post-production management faced the task of sculpting the raw, intense, and voluminous footage into Fuqua's relentless vision. The edit was a process of finding the razor's edge between propulsive momentum and necessary character beat. The sound design team had to build the film's dense oral tapestry from thousands of recorded elements, a process as creative and labor-intensive as the shoot itself. The film's final mix, where the balance between Washington's often subtle vocal menace, Hawk's reactive breaths, the street ambience, and Mancina's score was perfected, required weeks in a mixing theater. Concurrently, the marketing and awards campaign machinery began to spin, requiring production to supply assets and manage the messaging for a film that was both a commercial product and a serious artistic statement. In totality, the production management of Training Day was a masterclass in reactive, on-the-ground leadership. It successfully bottled the lightning of a volatile city and 2 incendiary performances, proving that the most compelling cinematic realism is not found, but painstakingly and expensively manufactured through relentless focus on detailed diplomacy and disciplined chaos. The pursuit of authenticity in Training Day is its most uncompromising and defining artistic principle, a multi-front campaign to ground its harrowing narrative in a bedrock of sociological, behavioral, and environmental truth that borders on the ethnographic. This is not authenticity as a stylistic garnish. It is authenticity as a film's structural and moral imperative. The effort began with David Ayer's screenplay, forged from his own experiences growing up in South Central Los Angeles and his prior research for films like The Fast and the Furious. Ayer conducted extensive interviews with active and former LAPD officers, including those tangentially related to the Rampart scandal, which was still a fresh, oozing wound in the city's psyche in the late 1990s. The dialogue, therefore, is not writerly invention, but transcription of specific, coded vernacular, the philosophical justifications of a corrupt cop, the street slang of gang members, the fearful compliance of residents. This linguistic authenticity provides the film's terrifying plausibility. These characters speak the language of their world with fluency that feels unrehearsed. Alonzo's monologues, in particular, are masterpieces of corrupted logic, sounding like the twisted manifesto of a man who has spent too long reasoning with monsters and decided to join them. This textual foundation meant every department's work was in service of realizing a pre-verified reality. The film's geographical and sociological authenticity is perhaps its most staggering technical achievement. The production did not merely shoot in Los Angeles. It embedded itself in the specific, charged neighborhoods of Westlake, Pico Union, and South Central. These are not generic bad parts of town. They have distinct architectures, demographics, and histories. Westlake, with its densely packed, run-down apartment buildings and vibrant, crowded streets, feels like a pressure cooker. South Central, with its wider streets, single-family homes behind barred windows, and open lots, present a different kind of territorial tension. The film meticulously captures these textures. It understands the economy of the street corner, the social hierarchy on the basketball court, the claustrophobic layout of a shotgun apartment. This environmental specificity does more than set the scene. It dictates the action. The choices characters make, where they drive, where they stop, who they talk to, are all constrained and informed by the unspoken rules of these very real places. The film's authenticity is thus spatial and behavioral. The characters move through a real ecosystem, and their survival depends on reading an invisible map correctly. The film's portrayal of police procedure and corruption operates in a chilling zone between documented fact and dramatic extrapolation. While Alonzo Harris is a fictional composite, his methods are distillation of real-world abuses exposed in the Rampart crash, community resources against street hoodlums, unit scandal, the confiscation of drug money for personal use, the planting of evidence, the filing of false reports, the cozy and intimidating relationships with informants, all were tactics revealed in the Rampart investigations. The film's genius is in personifying these systemic failures into a single, charismatic architect. Alonzo's crew mirrors the insular, loyal teams of officers implicated in Rampart. His philosophical justification, that the ends justify the means, that the war on drugs requires becoming a criminal, was a common thread in the testimony and psychology of officers who crossed the line. Where the film takes creative license is in compression and extremity. It condenses years of gradual moral decay into one catastrophic day. It escalates the violence with dramatic punch. The Rampart scandal was more about fraud, perjury, and evidence tampering than outright execution-style murders. However, this license serves a deeper truth. It viscerally illustrates a logical endpoint of philosophy that places itself above the law. The film is authentic not to the police blotter, but to the psychological and ethical corruption that the blotter can only hint at. The authenticity of performance is inextricably linked to this real-world context. Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke didn't just study their characters. They studied the environment that created them. Washington spent time with LAPD officers, absorbing their posture, their slang, their particular blend of authority and paranoia. His Alonzo is a man performing invincibility, and Washington captures the subtle cracks in that performance. The flicker of panic when he's alone in the car after the Sandmans, the desperate bravado when confronting the Russians. Hawke's preparation involved understanding the psychology of a rookie. The eagerness, the physical tells of fear, the sweating, the shaky hands, and the dawning horror that his rule book is useless. The supporting cast, filled with actors like Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Macy Gray, and real-life residents, brings an undeniable street credibility. They aren't playing gang members. They are embodying aspects of a culture they know intimately. This casting choice created a powerful verisimilitude. When Alonzo and Jake enter these spaces, they are truly outsiders navigating a world with its own solidified codes, not actors on a set surrounded by extras. Ultimately, Training Day's relationship with authenticity is its moral compass. The film's power to disturb, to provoke, and to linger stems from its refusal to be a simple parable. It presents Alonzo's world not as a cartoonish dystopia, but as a plausible, systemic outgrowth of failed policy, institutional cynicism, and urban neglect. The authenticity forces the audience to engage with uncomfortable questions. In this environment, are Alonzo's methods effective? Is Jake's idealism a strength or a fatal liability? The film offers no easy answers because the real world it mirrors offers none. Its final act of justice is not delivered by the courts or internal affairs, but by the street itself, a poetic, brutal, and deeply ambiguous resolution that feels true to the film's ruthless internal logic. The authenticity is not a celebration of this world, but an unblinking examination of it. It uses the tools of realism not to glamorize, but to indict, to warn, and to immortalize a specific, toxic chapter in the American urban experiment, proving that the most terrifying stories are those that feel like they could be happening just outside your door, in a city that sunlight reveals but never truly cleanses. The cinematography of Training Day, executed with brutal poeticism by Mauro Fiore, is a systematic visual argument against Hollywood glamour, a deliberate engineering of an image that feels excavated from reality rather than constructed for entertainment. Every technical choice, from film stock to lens filtration to camera movement, serves a dual purpose: to immerse the viewer in the oppressive physicality of the Los Angeles streets and to externalize the psychological corrosion occurring within the confines of Alonzo Harris's Monte Carlo. Fiore's approach is one of subtractive artistry. He strips away the comforting layers of conventional cinematic beauty to reveal a raw, sun-bleached nerve. He famously utilized a technique involving custom-made filters and the deliberate overexposure of certain film stocks to achieve the signature harsh, high-contrast look that makes the daylight sequences feel physically assaultive. The whites are blown out, the shadows are dense and inky, and midtones are compressed, creating a world with little visual comfort or gradation. This isn't the warm, golden California sun of tourism ads. It's a clinical, exposing light that reveals every crack in the pavement, every bead of sweat, and every flicker of fear in Jake Hoyt's eyes. This visual treatment transforms the environment into an antagonistic force, a character in its own right that is actively working against the protagonist's desire for clarity and order. The composition and framing within this bleached visual field are masterclasses in conveying power dynamics and psychological entrapment. Fiore and Fuqua make extensive use of the anamorphic widescreen format, but contrary to using it for epic vistas, they employ it for claustrophobic intimacy. Inside the Monte Carlo, the 2.35:1 frame is filled with the dashboard, the seats, and the two actors. The wide lens allows both Washington and Hawk to share the frame in tight two-shots, forcing the audience to constantly read their reactions in tandem. The composition often traps Jake. He is framed against the passenger window, with Alonzo a looming, dominant presence in the foreground, or vice versa, with Alonzo's reflection superimposed over Jake's face in the glass, visualizing the psychological invasion. In exterior scenes, the widescreen is used to emphasize Jake's isolation within a hostile landscape. He is a small figure at the end of a long, empty street, or he is centered in a frame surrounded by looming, anonymous architecture. The famous low-angle shots of Alonzo, making him appear monumentally powerful, are contrasted with high-angle or eye-level shots of Jake, reinforcing the hierarchy. The camera rarely offers a neutral perspective. It is always aligning us with Jake's subjective experience of being overwhelmed, scrutinized, and hunted. The evolution of lighting throughout the narrative day is a subtle yet profound storytelling mechanism. The film begins in the cool, soft, blue-hued dawn at Jake's house, a last bastion of innocence and domestic peace. As Alonzo picks him up, the light transitions into the harsh, vertical glare of late morning, a light that exposes and judges. The midday sequences are the most brutal, with shadows directly underfoot, creating a sense of stasis and inescapable heat. As the afternoon wanes into the magic hour, the light turns a sickly, golden orange. This is traditionally a cinematic hour of beauty, but here it feels feverish and ominous, coating the world in a glow that promises not romance, but the approach of violence. The final act at night is lit by the unnatural, mixed sources of the urban jungle. The cold blue of streetlights, the pulsing red of brake lights, the sickly green of pool table lamps, and the sudden, shocking white of muzzle flashes. This lighting progression is not arbitrary. It charts Jake's journey from the cool clarity of morning morality into the disorienting, morally ambiguous neon inferno of night. The technology of achieving this requires meticulous planning, using HMIs to augment the sun, controlling reflections, and often using minimal fill light to preserve the punishing contrast, a logistical nightmare that paid off in unparalleled atmospheric cohesion. Camera movement in Training Day is a language of tension and subjectivity. The film largely avoids slick, dolly-driven moves. Instead, it employs a restless, breathing handheld technique. However, this is not the frenetic, chaotic handheld of later action films. The camera operator's movements are deliberate, often a slow push-in on a character's face during a monologue or a slight, uneasy wobble that mimics a human observer's pulse. In the car, the camera feels like a third passenger, shifting its gaze from Alonzo to Jake and back, reacting to the dialogue. When Jake is alone and in danger, walking into the Sandman's house or fleeing to backyards, the handheld becomes more pronounced, adopting a first-person urgency that places the audience directly in his peril. This technique creates a visceral, empathetic connection to Jake's panic. Conversely, when Alonzo is in control, the camera often becomes still, locked down, as if acknowledging the gravitational pull of his dominance. The climactic raid uses a more frenetic multi-camera style, but the edits are still grounded in spatial logic. We are never lost in chaos. We are strategically disoriented, mirroring Jake's experience of trying to navigate a lethal labyrinth. The color science of film, achieved in meticulous photochemical timing in the lab, is the final layer of its psychological portrait. As mentioned, the palette is deliberately drained, but within that constraint, specific colors carry meaning. The film is dominated by a triad of yellow, sunlight sickness, brown dirt decay, and concrete gray. Blue is almost entirely absent as a comforting hue. When it appears, it's in the cold fluorescence of Sarah's house with the eerie night lights, signifying alienation and false sanctuary. The only primary color that consistently pops is red. The taillights of the Monte Carlo, the blood on Jake's shirt, the neon signs in the gang territories. Red becomes a color of danger, violence, and the trailing evidence of the day's sins. This controlled, almost monochromatic palette makes these moments of red feel like visual screams. In totality, the cinematography of Training Day is a holistic system of visual oppression. It denies the audience beauty, comfort, and easy orientation. It forces us to feel the heat, the sweat, the confinement, and the terror. It is a technological and artistic achievement that serves the story with fanatical devotion, proving that the most powerful images are not those that are prettiest, but those that are most true to the fractured, frightening soul of the narrative they embody. The camera doesn't just record the story. It becomes the story's nervous system, transmitting its dread directly into the viewer's psyche with an efficiency that is both brutal and brilliant. The sound design and music production of Training Day function as a parallel nervous system to the film's visual body, a complex oral architecture engineered not for musicality or sonic spectacle, but for relentless psychological immersion and visceral, physiological response. This is a soundscape of dread, a carefully curated catalog of noises that feel less like effects and more like environmental symptoms. Supervising sound editor Bruce Stamber and his team, alongside composer Mark Mancina, operated under a mandate of hyperrealism and subjective intensity. Their work represents a massive, albeit invisible, investment of the film's $45 million budget, allocating resources to record thousands of custom sounds, mix them with surgical precision, and compose a score that acts as a subliminal pressure system rather than a melodic guide. The result is an auditory experience that is as gritty, specific, and unforgiving as the visuals, closing the sensory loop that traps the audience in Jake Hoyt's harrowing day. The sound doesn't accompany the film. It completes the film's reality, making the threat not just visible but audible, tactile, and inescapable. Mark Mancina's score is a masterpiece of minimalist ambient tension. A composer known for rhythmic drive, speed, bad boys, Mancina here almost entirely abandons melody and traditional orchestration. His palette consists of droning, atonal electronic textures, deep sub-bass pulses, echoing metallic percussion, and occasional mournful, distorted brass swells that sound like a memory of jazz heard through a wall. The score is mixed low, often blending seamlessly with the diegetic soundscape. The hum of the Monte Carlo's engine, the distant thump of a bass line from a passing car. It doesn't tell the audience how to feel. It amplifies what is already there. A low, Oscillating drone might underscore a tense drive, rising in frequency as Jake's anxiety peaks. A sudden, discordant sting of brass might coincide with a moment of revealed brutality, acting as a psychological jump scare. The most musical moment is the melancholic, lonely trumpet motif that appears over the end credits, a belated release of the sorrow and trauma the film has bottled up. Mancina's approach is fundamentally anti-heroic. There is no triumphant theme for Jake, no villainous leitmotif for Alonzo. The music reflects the environment itself, a place where morality has been eroded into a neutral, threatening hum. This technological choice to subordinate score to sound design was critical. It prevents the film from becoming a genre piece and instead roots it in a chilling, documentarian present. The sound design itself is an exercise in obsessive, layered detail, a technology of authenticity that builds the world from the ground up. The team recorded vast libraries of location-specific sounds in South Central and Westlake, Louisiana. The ambient track is never generic city noise. It is a precise collage, the specific cadence of Spanish and English arguments filtering through apartment walls, the whir of a distant helicopter, an ever-present symbol of surveillance in these neighborhoods, the squeak of a rusted playground swing, the bass patterns of West Coast hip-hop emanating from different sources, creating a sonic map of contested territory. This dense bed of sound does more than establish place. It creates a sense of perpetual, low-grade threat. The world is always listening, always watching, always buzzing with potential violence. Inside the Monte Carlo, the sound design shifts to a more intimate, yet equally oppressive register. The luxurious purr of the custom engine is a constant, a symbol of Alonzo's power. The crisp click of the turn signal, the thump of the bass from the stereo when Alonzo asserts control. These are all character notes. The dialogue recording is pristine, capturing every nuance of Washington's vocal performance. The smooth paternal baritone, the sudden gravelly shift in the threat, the barely contained rage in his whispered asides. Similarly, Hawk's breathing, his hesitant swallows, and the tremor in his voice are all picked up with intimate clarity, making his fear palpably physical. The treatment of violence in the sound mix is where the design becomes truly masterful and disturbing. It rejects Hollywood convention. Gunshots are not the clean, powerful bangs of action movies. They are sharp, concussive, terrifyingly loud reports that distort the mix and ring in the aftermath. The beating in the park is a symphony of sickening, what impacts, grunts of effort, and the crack of bone on concrete, sounds that feel invasively real. In the Sandman's house, the shotgun blast is a world-ending explosion in a confined space, followed by a hollow, tinnitus-like ring that subjectively places us inside Jake's stunned, disoriented head. This commitment to authentic, painful sound makes the violence not exciting, but repulsive and traumatic, which is precisely the point. The sound design forces the audience to feel the bodily cost of every act, aligning us completely with Jake's visceral horror. Even the absence of sound is weaponized. The moments of silence before a violent act or the hollow, wind-swept quiet of a street after Alonzo delivers a threat are louder than any explosion, heavy with dreadful potential. The final, critical layer of the oral architecture is the use of source music, the songs that emanate from car radios, apartment windows, and club speakers. This is not a soundtrack in the traditional sense. It is environmental characterization. The music selected, heavy gangster rap from the era, like the sound of Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, is not just background noise. It is the cultural heartbeat of the territory Alonzo patrols. When Alonzo cranks his own stereo, it's an act of sonic colonization, asserting his dominance over the auditory space. The music choices also serve as ironic counterpoint. A smooth R&B track might play while Alonzo orchestrates a horrific act, creating a dissonance that is deeply unsettling. This integration of source music blurs the line between score and diegetic sound, further cementing the film's reality. In totality, The sound and music of Training Day represent a pinnacle of the craft. They forego easy audience manipulation through melody or bombast in favor of a more profound and disturbing goal: authentic sensory immersion. The technology deployed, the field recordings, the complex multi-track mixing, the innovative score, serves to erase the boundary between the viewer and the film. We don't just watch Jake sweat in the heat. We hear the flies buzzing. We don't just see Alonzo's menace. We feel the sub-bass of his voice in our chest. This oral landscape is a final, essential ingredient in the film's alchemy of dread, proving that true horror and tension are often more effectively transmitted to the ear than the eye, in the spaces between the notes and in the unbearable clarity of a world where every sound carries a potential for harm. The marketing and audience strategy for Training Day was a sophisticated, high-stakes gamble in tonal calibration, tasked with selling a morally bleak, R-rated, and psychologically brutal character study to a mainstream audience without diluting its power or misrepresenting its content. Warner Brothers faced a unique challenge: how to market a film where the ostensible villain is its most charismatic element, and the hero's journey ends not in triumph, but in traumatic, ambiguous survival. The campaign, orchestrated in the shadow of the film's October 2001 release, had to navigate these complexities while also existing in a national atmosphere freshly traumatized by the 9/11 attacks, an event that had temporarily shifted public appetite. The solution was a campaign that leaned unapologetically into the film's strengths: the seismic, against-type performance of Denzel Washington and a relentless, real-time thriller structure. The marketing capital was deployed not to obscure the film's darkness, but to frame it as a gripping, must-see event for adult audiences, a prestigious, dangerous piece of filmmaking that promised an experience unlike any other in the multiplex. The pre-release campaign was laser-focused on Denzel Washington's transformation. All key art and trailers position Alonzo Harris as a force of nature. The iconic poster, a tight, gritty close-up of Washington in a Kangol hat and goatee, his gaze piercing the viewer, communicated menace, charisma, and a radical departure from his heroic roles in Glory, Malcolm X, and The Hurricane. The tagline, "The only thing more dangerous than the line being crossed is the cop who will cross it," was a masterstroke. It framed the film not as a whodunit, but as a chilling how far will he go psychological duel. Trailers were cut with a percussive, urgent rhythm, showcasing Washington's most electrifying monologues, "King Kong ain't got shit on me," and the most intense confrontations, while carefully preserving the plot's central mystery, Alonzo's true, desperate motivation. The marketing presented the film as a high-wire act of suspense, a day-long descent into a moral abyss. This strategy served to attract audiences seeking sophisticated, actor-driven drama and thriller enthusiasts, while the R-rating and urban setting clearly demarcated its target as an adult demographic, not a family one. The demographic and psychographic targeting was precise. Primary efforts focus on urban centers and markets with a strong history of supporting adult dramas and films with African-American leads. Marketing placements in publications like Vibe, The Source, and on BET and MTV highlighted the film's street credibility and Washington star power. Simultaneously, efforts were made to reach the broader cinephile and awards-watching audience through coverage in mainstream entertainment outlets, Asterisk Entertainment Weekly, Asterisk Premiere, and film festivals. It premiered at the San Sebastian International Film Festival. The campaign also subtly leveraged the film's connection to the real-world Rampart scandal for credibility, though it avoided explicit, potentially litigious claims. The timing of the release, early October, was strategic. It positioned the film at the beginning of the fall prestige season, allowing time for word of mouth to build before the holiday blockbuster rush, and giving it a long runway for awards consideration. This dual target approach, urban/streetwise and adult/cinephile, was designed to build a strong opening weekend from the core demographic while allowing critical acclaim to pull in a broader audience over time. The distribution and release strategy supported this calibrated approach. The film opened wide, but not overwhelmingly so, in 1,773 theaters. This was a confident, platform-style wide release, indicating the studio believed in strong per-screen averages driven by pent-up demand for a quality adult film. The October 5th date avoided direct competition with lingering summer action films and the family-friendly fare that dominates later in the fall. The international rollout was more measured, as the film's intensely American, LA-specific context was seen as a potential barrier. International marketing leaned even harder on Denzel Washington's global star power and the film's thriller elements, downplaying the nuanced police corruption angle in favor of the primal teacher-student/good cop-bad cop dynamic. The opening weekend result, a $22.6 million first-place finish, proved the strategy correct. It demonstrated that a challenging, serious film could command audience attention if marketed with intelligence and conviction. Post-release, the marketing campaign underwent a critical and highly successful pivot. It transformed into an awards campaign. As ecstatic reviews poured in, particularly for Washington's performance, Warner Brothers swiftly capitalized. Advertisements began featuring bold, critic quote pullouts hailing Washington's work as a masterpiece. The narrative shifted from see this thrilling crime story to witness an iconic, award-worthy performance. This phase of the campaign was targeted directly at Academy and Guild voters, with screenings for your consideration ads in trade publications, and relentless media coverage of Washington's transformative process. This effort reached its apex with Washington's Oscar win for Best Actor, a victory that was itself a marketing triumph. The Oscar win triggered a second life for the film in theaters and, more importantly, supercharged its home video sales. The ancillary marketing for the DVD release prominently featured the Oscar win, branding it as a modern classic. The long-tail marketing strategy, therefore, was a perfect two-stage rocket. First, sell the film as a gripping, dangerous thriller to achieve commercial success. Second, sell it as an award-winning landmark of performance to ensure its permanent place in the cultural canon and guarantee decades of downstream revenue. The marketing of Training Day is a textbook example of how to steward a difficult, brilliant film to both popular and critical triumph, proving that authenticity, when framed with savvy, can be the most powerful marketing tool of all. The critical reception of Training Day upon its release was a thunderclap of acclaim, a near-unanimous recognition that a new high watermark had been set for the police drama and for screen acting. Critics, often divided on gritty, morally complex films, converge in awe. The reviews were less assessments of a film and more coronations of performance and an experience. Major publications like the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, Rolling Stone, and Entertainment Weekly awarded it their highest ratings. The praise focused on several pillars: the seismic, career-redefining work of Denzel Washington, who was described with terms like volcanic, mesmerizing, and unforgettable; the taut, unrelenting direction of Antoine Fuqua, who maintained a vice-like tension for 2 hours; the authenticity and power of David Ayer's street-smart script; and the perfectly pitched, vulnerable counter-performance of Ethan Hawke. Critics noted the film's bravery and its moral ambiguity, its refusal to provide easy answers or a comforting resolution. They highlighted its potent social commentary, seeing it not just as a thriller but as a bleak, urgent diagnosis of institutional rot and urban decay. This critical consensus performed an essential economic and cultural function. It provided the quality imprimatur that gave adult audiences permission to engage with a deeply disturbing film. It framed Training Day not as exploitative or gratuitous, but as a serious, important, and masterfully executed work of art. The reviews acted as a powerful risk reduction signal, assuring viewers that the darkness they would enter was purposeful and artistically justified, transforming the film from a potential downer into a must-see event for anyone interested in the pinnacle of cinematic craft. The award season trajectory of Training Day is a case study in the power of a singular, undeniable performance to elevate an entire project. The film entered the race as a strong contender in the acting categories, but in a year dominated by grandiose fantasy, *The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring*, and lush musicals, *Moulin Rouge*, its gritty realism was not the typical profile of a Best Picture frontrunner. However, Denzel Washington's performance as Alonzo Harris became an unstoppable force. He swept the precursor awards, winning the Golden Globe, the SAG Award, and the Broadcast Film Critics Award. The narrative was perfect. A beloved actor, known for noble roles, delivering a chilling, transformative portrayal of charismatic evil. This narrative, combined with the sheer technical mastery of performance, made his Oscar win for Best Actor seem inevitable, which it was. Ethan Hawke received a well-deserved nomination for Best Supporting Actor, a recognition of his essential role as the film's moral and emotional anchor. The film itself was nominated for Best Supporting Actress, a surprise nod for the brief but potent work of actress Lisa G., but did not secure a Best Picture nomination. This award's profile is revealing. It shows the industry's willingness to crown transcendent individual achievement within a film, even if the film's overall tone and resolution were perhaps too harsh for the broader Academy membership's top prize. Washington's win injected a massive dose of permanent cultural capital into the film. It was no longer just a great crime drama. It was an Oscar-winning landmark, a film that housed one of the most celebrated performances in modern history. This designation ensured its place in film school curricula, acting workshops, and greatest of all-time lists for decades to come. The legacy forecast from the vantage point of late 2001 would have been exceptionally strong, but likely underestimated the film's enduring, deepening resonance. Analysts would have correctly predicted it would be hailed as a classic of its genre, a career peak for Washington, and a defining film for Fuqua and Air. They would have noted its influence on a wave of gritty, morally ambiguous television that would follow, like The Shield, which debuted months later, and The Wire. However, the film's legacy has proven more profound and multifaceted. It has become a permanent touchstone in discussions of police brutality, systemic corruption, and the psychology of power. Alonzo Harris is studied not just as a character, but as an archetype, the corrupt authority figure who rationalizes his evil with a personal philosophy. Lines from the film: "King Kong ain't got shit on me. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove," have entered the broader lexicon, used in context far beyond film criticism. The film is a rite of passage for actors and filmmakers, a benchmark for uncompromising, authentic street-level storytelling. Its visual and oral style has been endlessly referenced and imitated. Furthermore, in the 2 decades since its release, as national conversations about policing have intensified, Training Day has only gained relevance. Its portrayal of the police force operating as a predatory, sovereign power feels less like a dramatic exaggeration and more like a chillingly prescient allegory. Its legacy is no longer just cinematic. It is socio-political. The long-term valuation of Training Day as a financial and cultural asset is immense. As a cornerstone of Warner Brothers' library, it generates steady, reliable revenue through every window. Television licensing. It is a staple on cable, streaming deals, and physical/digital sales. Its Oscar-winning status makes it a perennial seller in collections. For the actors and filmmakers involved, it remains a career-defining credit that commands respect and opens doors. The film's cultural equity is incalculable. It is a film that is constantly being discovered by new generations, its power undiminished by time. It is taught in screenwriting classes for its structure, in acting classes for its performances, and in film studies courses for its social commentary and formal mastery. It is a film that sparks debate and analysis, a sign of its rich, uncomfortable complexity. Financially, the $45 million investment has yielded returns many times over, but more importantly, it yielded a timeless piece of art that continues to provoke, disturb, and inspire. It is a rare film that is both a commercial success and an uncompromising artistic statement, proving that the two are not mutually exclusive when the execution is flawless. In the final analysis, Training Day's place in film history is secure as a paradigm-shifting work. It didn't just tell a story about a bad cop. It immersed the audience in the seductive, terrifying logic of corruption, making them complicit in the journey. It demonstrated that a performance could be so magnetic it becomes dangerous, and that a thriller could be so morally serious it becomes a tragedy. The film stands as a permanent monument to the power of committed artistry in the service of a difficult truth. Its forecast is one of perpetual relevance. As long as institutions wield power, as long as individuals rationalize their sins, and as long as cinema seeks to explore the darkest corners of the human experiment, Training Day will be there, a flawless, frightening, and essential mirror held up to the face of power, asking the same question Jake Hoyt faced. How much of your soul are you willing to pay to survive in a world that has already sold its own? As the final haunting shot holds on the gold detective shield, Alonzo Harris's Grail, Jake Hoyt's temptation, now a cold, inert piece of metal on a kitchen table. The film concludes not with resolution, but with profound and resonant silence. This silence is a true ending. It is a silence of traumatic absorption, of a moral hangover, of a mind trying to process the unprocessable. Training Day does not offer catharsis in any traditional sense. It offers survival and the terrifying knowledge that comes with it. The door does not close on a redeemed hero or a vanquished villain. It closes on a man who has stared into an abyss so profound that its darkness has permanently altered the color of his world. This final, weighty emptiness is the film's ultimate artistic triumph. It completes a masterfully constructed circuit of tension, refusing the easy release of a Hollywood ending, and instead delivering a conclusion that is psychologically honest, emotionally devastating, and thematically perfect. The harmony achieved is not one of victory, but of devastating clarity. The clarity that in the war for the soul of the city and of the men sworn to protect it, there are no clean victories, only survivors bearing the scars of the battles they barely won. Our deep dive into the cinematic landmark has been a journey through the anatomy of a masterpiece. We have dissected the strategic allocation of a $45 million budget, an investment that prioritized authentic location immersion and powerhouse performances over digital spectacle, yielding returns in cultural capital that dwarf the financial. We mapped the intricate psychological warfare between two brilliantly realized character systems, Alonzo's predatory philosophical pragmatism and Jake's crumbling, reactive idealism. We examined the technology of dread, Mauro Fiore's sun-bleached, claustrophobic cinematography, the hyper-realistic, oppressive sound design, and Mark Mancina's ambient score of unease, all engineering an experience that feels less watched and more endured. We analyzed production management that bottled the volatile energy of Los Angeles' streets, the marketing that sold a bleak character study as a must-see event, and the awards trajectory that cemented its status in the cinematic pantheon. At every turn, Training Day demonstrated a fanatical commitment to its own brutal truth, proving that the most powerful stories are those that refuse to look away from the corrosive mechanics of power and the fragile architecture of a good man's conscience. Reflecting on the core trinity of art, technology, and capital, we see in Training Day a flawless, virtuous cycle operating at the highest level. The art, David Ayer's authentic, morally complex script, and Antoine Fuqua's unwavering directorial vision, demanded a specific, unvarnished truth. This demand pushed the technology to innovate in realism. The custom lighting filters, the location source sound, the verite camera work. This advanced, gritty technology, in turn, required significant but focused capital to realize, not for CGI armies, but for community access, safety, and the salaries of artists committed to a difficult process. The resulting art was so potent, so masterfully executed, that it generated extraordinary returns. Commercial success, critical coronation, industry awards, and a permanent legacy. The capital was not just recouped, it was multiplied in value 100-fold, not merely in dollars, but in the currency of lasting cultural impact. This cycle stands as a rebuke to the notion that serious, challenging filmmaking cannot be commercially viable. It proves that when capital is placed in the service of visionary art and enabling technology, the result transcends entertainment to become a part of our collective understanding of the human condition. For us, the audience, the final, lingering lesson of Training Day is about the cost of consciousness. Jake Hoyt begins the day naive and ends it traumatized, but he ends it knowing. He has seen the true face of the institution he wanted to join. He understands the price of the badge on his table. The film implicates us in this education. We are not passive viewers. We are Jake's silent partner in the passenger seat. We feel the same temptation, the same fear, the same revulsion, and the same desperate need to survive. The film forces us to ask ourselves the questions Jake must answer. What would I have smoked? What would I have witnessed? When would I have run? There is no comfortable answer. This is the film's great gift and its burden. It doesn't let us off the hook. It makes the moral calculus personal. The final shot of the shield is not an answer. It is a question posed directly to us. What is this symbol worth? What would you pay for it? And having seen its true cost, could you ever wear it without seeing Alonzo Harris's reflection in the gold? So, as we conclude this analysis, we are left not with the closing of a case file, but with the opening of a permanent inquiry. Training Day endures because it is more than a film. It is an experience, a warning, and a benchmark. It reminds us that the business of beauty in cinema is not always about creating something beautiful to look at, but about creating something true to feel, even when that truth is ugly, frightening, and complex. It stands as a monument to the power of performance, the necessity of directorial vision, and the unshakable strength of a story that trusts its audience to walk into the darkness and find their own way out, scarred but wiser. In a landscape often filled with noise and distraction, Training Day remains a clear, cold, and essential voice, speaking a truth about power and corruption that, 2 decades on, has only grown more urgent, more relevant, and more devastatingly brilliant. If you found this deep dive meaningful, my literature-loving friends, consider liking and subscribing so we can keep decoding the business and beauty of cinema together.